Iran fires on U.S. warships while gas prices here at home continue to climb, but Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says help is on the way. The violent rhetoric from the left seems to be intensifying as Democrats fret over new congressional maps and a possible passage of the SAVE Act. And MAHA tackling something new, antidepressant use. It's Tuesday, May 5th, 2026, and this is news and commentary delivered with common sense. It's delivered from America's heartland. This is Heartlander News. Welcome into Heartlander News. I'm Chris Stigall. You know, the media won't stop pushing this same tired line that political violence in America is, more often than not, a right-wing problem. And that narrative was never true, and it's completely indefensible, as you know. We've now had a third assassination attempt on President Trump. A gunman opened fire near the White House Correspondents' Dinner, now facing charges for trying to kill the president. This is not just simply heated rhetoric. It's not democracy under stress. This is a national security emergency. And we have to look at the culture feeding it. After Charlie Kirk was assassinated in September of 2025, for instance, a lot of people on the left, they didn't grieve. You saw it, they celebrated. Many lost their jobs because they just couldn't keep their sick excitement off of social media. I remember when the great Rush Limbaugh passed in 2021, that same ugly glee poured out of people. You remember just last week, Jimmy Kimmel joked that Melania Trump had the glow of an expected widow. Now, he can call that a joke. People can dismiss that. Oh, I was just joking. But normal people hear something much darker. And it didn't just start yesterday. In 2017, you'll remember a Bernie Sanders supporter tried to massacre Republican lawmakers at a congressional baseball practice. It nearly killed leader Steve Scalise. And then in 2015, before that, Baltimore's mayor openly told cops to give rioters the space to destroy. Remember that? And then 2020. The BLM riots, they torched neighborhoods, they killed dozens, it caused something like $1 to $2 billion in property damage. The most expensive civil unrest in U.S. history. And legacy media just shrugged it off. Boys will be boys, rioters will be rioters. Even CSIS, no friend to conservatives, dropped a September 2025 report showing that left-wing terrorist attacks and plots outnumbered far-right ones in the first half of 2025, 5-1. Now, that's the first time that's happened in over 30 years. We've also watched coordinated attacks on ICE facilities and Antifa plots keep coming, and there was Tesla vandalism, arson cases. I mean, it feels like you could go on and on. Batya Ungar-Sargon, if you know who she is, she's right. The usual studies are cooked. They bury left-wing violence and pump up everything else. Repeated attempts on the president, targeted shootings of conservatives, cities on fire, online victory dances over dead conservatives, space to destroy, all that talk. And then the window into their hearts that they call jokes on late night, all that stuff is not coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. That is a deadly pattern with no end in sight. And I think I speak for all of us here. A country too scared to name the problem honestly is never going to fix it. This isn't a polite both sides discussion. That's nonsense. The rising, excused, and I underline excused, and increasingly open threat right now is left-wing rage aimed at Trump, aimed at conservatives, aimed at Christians, cops, anyone that gets in the way of destroying this country from the inside. When people are actively trying to kill the President of the United States, gun down Republican lawmakers, burn cities, cheer political murder, this isn't just simple polarization. The problem is permission. And the left has been handing it out for years. Well, now we know who they are. and we know what they're doing. The question is, will the American voter allow this to succeed at the ballot box this fall? And with that, the news of the day today, which is more of the same, I'm sorry to report. You have a judge, this is from the Washington Times just yesterday, a judge apologizes to Trump's would-be assassin for treatment in jail. Not making it up. A federal judge yesterday criticized the restrictive treatment in prison of the alleged White House Correspondents Association gunman and apologized to him for being placed in restraints and confinement in jail. That's a judge. He also promised Cole Allen that he would try to get him a cell with a window and a Bible. Amazing. Well, the fact of the matter is, let's go to clip 4 here, Aaron. Eric Holder and people like him, this started some time ago under Barack Obama. You bring a knife, we bring a gun. You go low, we kick them. I mean, this guy has typified what really started off a trend that we've seen, giving aid and comfort to this. And in fact, he doesn't feel like Democrats have gone nearly far enough. Give me clip 4 here. Here's Eric Holder saying, we need to go further.
Got out of the House of Representatives the last time, didn't pass the Senate because you couldn't get past the filibuster, largely because Senators Manchin and Sinema decided that they did not want to vote to reform the rules. And so the next time there is that ability by Democrats, if we have the presidency as well as the House and the Senate, that to use that power. You know, one of the things that just kind of gets me is that progressives and Democrats have a reluctance, an uncomfortability with the acquisition and the use of power. And Republicans don't have those problems. Conservatives don't have those problems. And so the next time we have that power, we need to use it, not for the special interests, as Republicans have done, but in service to the American people.
And I'll tell you, I think you got to understand that that's what motivates it all. Power. If you don't understand what Eric Holder just said there, take nothing else he said and understand it's that. Power. It isn't about representing the people. It isn't about a representative republic. It is about power for them, space to destroy. They are consumed with it at all times. And anyone that stands in their way, chiefly Republicans or conservatives, well, carte blanche. Do what you got to do because we got to have the power. You probably saw this by now. Bill Maher, if you'll give me clip 8 here, Bill Maher, just this past weekend on his show, was talking about this most recent assassination attempt on President Trump, and people just aren't wired right. Even he, who is no fan of the president's head. And listen to the audience response, by the way, while he talks about it. People are not wired right if they seem to almost gleefully enjoy it.
Well, let's get the ugly news about the political violence out of the way first, because we have to talk about it. I'm just going to vomit my take on it, and then you can argue. I would just like to say, if you're one of these people, and there's many in this country who watched that and was disappointed the president wasn't killed. See, they're laughing at that. You're not a good person.
Meanwhile, we continue to pray for the former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. He's at least was listed recently in critical condition in the hospital. And the current Islamist mayor of New York. Now, what just as human beings do, and I'm playing this not because it's particularly important to anybody, what Zoran Mandami thinks of anything, particularly Rudy Giuliani. You can imagine that he doesn't have much time for Rudy Giuliani. I think we all know that. That's not a secret. But, I remember after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and President Trump, I believe, was asked about it on the tarmac at some sort of event. He had not heard it. And he took a moment and he paused and he said, I don't remember exactly the context, but the sentiment was not one of aggression. It was not one of hostility. It was not good. I'm glad she's gone. It wasn't laughter. He said, that's a shame. I hadn't heard that. We wish her family well. It's just what decent people do. When you hear someone is in critical condition and nearly dead, you don't cheer it. You don't say, give me number 6 here, if you would, please, Aaron. This is the current mayor of New York when asked about the former mayor of New York, who take any recent news about Rudy Giuliani aside and understand that in terms of 9/11, in terms of American history, this guy was a pillar. He was an important figure at that time for specifically New York City. And here's the current mayor asked about the former mayor in critical condition. Listen to this.
Is there anything you'd like to say about his contributions to the city, the fact that he got the city through 9/11?
Well, I think former Mayor Giuliani is someone that we as New Yorkers know well. And he's been a fixture in our city's politics and public life for so many years. And I know that many New Yorkers are concerned by the reports that he's in critical condition. And so we do keep him and his family in our prayers at this time.
I mean, I guess I'm glad. It's a good thing that he threw in there at the end. New Yorkers keep him in our prayers at this time, but he talks about it like other people do, not him. Did you notice how he did that? He's gifted. He's gifted very similar to guys like Barack Obama with words. He'll say the right thing there at the end as if to suggest he said it, but he didn't really. Rather than just say, I wish his family well, we pray for him. And I'm sure there are people out there that miss him and think a lot of him, and I'm sure they're praying for him. Wink. It's the character of people. Sometimes politics can't be everything. It can't be the only thing. And for the American left, as I remind you with Eric Holder, it is the only thing. It's about power and power at all costs. Then there is the exoskeleton, as Rush used to call him, James Carville in number 7 here. This guy, and it's really a shame because once upon a time, even though on the left, he was a guy that was fun to debate and wasn't completely insane. He's just mentally ill. And in some sense, I guess if it weren't so deadly serious the way the left acts in trying to kill Republicans, this would be kind of entertaining. Give me number 7 here, the exoskeleton, wound up as usual.
I had a very interesting half of me at the Kentucky Derby, and I want to share it with you. There's a lot of people dressed up, particularly women, get hats and they get dressed up, and it's much more diverse than you think. And I had a very elegant lady, absolutely lady. I mean, she was dignified and highly educated, at an MBA from Vanderbilt or something. And she says, James, our friends and I love it when you talk nasty about Trump. Just use all the language you can. But she says, you know what? When I see his face, it reminds me of the backside of my husband's scrotum. Yeah, that's what it is. You look like the backside of a nutsack. That's what you are, Trump. No wonder Lindsey Graham's always trying to lick your face. But my point here is these people, and they were coming up to me, didn't matter, black women, white women, elegant women, everything that you can imagine. And almost to a person, they said, you keep calling him nasty names because that's what he deserves. And that's who he is, and that's what he deserves. And we're going to keep calling him. And your new name, dude, is Scrotum Face, because that's what you are, Scrotum Face.
First of all, I guess since we're talking in terms of schoolyard taunts, I'm rubber, you're glue. For goodness sakes, James Carville, have you looked in a mirror lately? That's pretty loose talk from a guy that looks like you do, but nevertheless, I'm really obsessed with genitalia, and that's where the American left's conversation has gone. That's what they've got left. Again, I don't play this because it's necessarily a surprise to anyone. It's just a reminder that as we talk about things that are difficult right now, gas prices, not great right now. I mean, they've jumped up dramatically. People are really concerned about the economy right now. And does President Trump have the prescription? Look, personally, I believe he does. I think we're suffering some difficulty at the moment because he's doing some really tough things, and it's making people who traditionally would support him and vote for him wobbly. But I would just say to anyone who's feeling a little wobbly or thinking about either sitting it out or worse still, voting for something else, that's your something else. And I just think that the American voter ought to keep in mind, despite what is very difficult stuff that we're living through right now, economically and otherwise, I get it. The alternative is that people obsessed with power at all costs will hold on to it at all costs and don't care a lick about trying to better your life or mine, simply care about holding on to the power and destroying anyone that opposes them. It's just important to keep in mind. And just 2 more stories to underscore that. There was yet another attempted shooting, though we don't know that it was necessarily directed at anyone in particular. Vice President J.D. Vance passing through an area in Washington Monday afternoon. Secret Service shot and wounded an armed man just south of the White House in a burst of gunfire that also grazed a young bystander in an area packed with pedestrians. No indication, says the New York Times, that the man taken to a hospital was targeting anyone. But I guarantee you, if you look into this, anybody that's walking around with a loaded firearm around the White House is probably up to no good. And I would bet he's probably not a registered Republican and a member of the NRA. Just a hunch. And then this from the Washington Times. The accused Los Angeles fire starter aligned himself with suspected vigilante assassin Luigi Mangione. Again, underscoring the point, at all costs, whatever it takes, do whatever you must. The man accused of starting one of the most devastating fires in the history of Los Angeles ranted against capitalism and the wealthy, and when asked why someone might torch the Pacific Palisades, compared such an act to the fatal shooting of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, said prosecutors. That blaze killed 12 people and was part of a series of fires that caused tens of billions of dollars in damage, all because of politics. All because of what Eric Holder said, power. Power at all costs. Which brings me to the Supreme Court and other states now moving on the redrawing of congressional maps, giving Republicans a stronger hand. This is also something Democrats don't like, because the whole premise of drawing congressional boundaries based on race was sacrosanct to them. It just made sense. And for a long time, this country just said, oh, sure, yeah, go ahead and draw boundary lines that contain mostly black or brown people, and we will have special representation for them. Now, that's an affront to everything the civil rights movement said they were about. What am I talking about? A few stories here today. From the New York Times, the Supreme Court has agreed to fast-track the Louisiana voting map decision. The Louisiana case is what caused the dominoes to fall on this. The Supreme Court yesterday immediately transmitting to the lower courts its opinion, striking down Louisiana's congressional map rather than wait the 32 days that would have been routine. Last week's opinion from the court, which weakened the Voting Rights Act, says the New York Times, by concluding that one of Louisiana's majority black congressional districts was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander, has set off a chaotic scramble in the state. Oh, I don't know that it's chaotic. I think it's quite clear. Don't you? Look, think of this another way. Can you imagine someone saying we're going to draw new white congressional boundary lines? But just put that word white in front of it. It's kind of like when people say Christian nationalist, immediately people recoil. Ooh, that's a bad word. But somehow when you say black pride or black nationalism or black drawn districts for congressional seats, that makes total sense. Why? I don't know. Guilt, shame, whatever that the left has heaped upon people for years and years and years and created a victim mentality that a white person can't represent a black person or vice versa. A black person can't represent a white person. If we're all equal under the law, then why in the world does someone with a different skin pigment need separate representation from me? It makes no sense. And the New York Times admits it, if you dig a little bit into this story. The court's decision could make it harder for lawmakers to create majority-minority districts throughout the country and has set off a scramble in states across the South to redistrict before the midterm elections. Shazam. That's right. That's what it's all about. That's what it's always been about. Harder for lawmakers to create minority districts throughout their state. That's all it's about. That's all they care about. Meanwhile, down in Florida, DeSantis continues to roll and kick butt. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said yesterday he's signing into law a new set of congressional lines that could net his party up to 4 House seats this November. Now, they are not happy about it in the pulpit on the American left. Have you noticed that? The uptick in the men of the cloth that are jumping in the Democrat races out there. There's one going on, of course, with Tallarico in Texas. Pay attention to Kansas. There's a new guy who's registered as a Democrat named Adam Hamilton. He's going to challenge Republican Senator Roger Marshall. These are men of the cloth, holy men, you see, who've decided to partner with the party of abortion. Right. Hear more of the great leaders from the pulpit on the left talking about this very issue I was just discussing, congressional boundaries. Give me number one here, if you would, please, Aaron. This is Pastor Kevin Johnson working in, as any right reverend would do, a little Jay-Z to drive home the point.
I could have dealt with John Roberts doing what he did. I get it. I could have dealt with all of the other conservative justices voting the way that they did. But you know where I'm going. But I have been wrestling with this one particular justice on the United States Supreme Court. You know who I'm talking about. I'll let you go ahead and say his name. Clarence Thomas. And you know Clarence Thomas, the one who was born in Pinpoint, Georgia. I didn't even know that there was a Pinpoint, Georgia in the first place. The one who came from a small black community that was founded by freed, enslaved people. The one who grew up poor. The one who is from segregated South. The one who at one point wanted to be a Black Panther. The one who at one point idolized Malcolm X and even had a poster of Malcolm X in his dorm room. The one. Well, I know y'all didn't think that he had some of that, but that's the one I'm talking about today. The one. The one when he was in college wore a beret and had on some camouflage gear and had on some combat boots. The one. I'm sitting up here saying to myself, Clarence, if you were trying to be down with the Black Panthers, if you had on your combat boots, if you had on your camouflage, then Clarence, what in the world happened to you? Yes, the one. The one who got into Yale Law School. How? Because of affirmative action. Yes, the one who benefited from the very race-conscious admissions policy that he has spent 35 years on the Supreme Court trying to dismantle. Yes, the one. His entire career was built upon civil rights movement. Every door that he's walked through has been because of the blood, the sweat, and the tears of our ancestors. Yes, I'm talking about the one. I'm talking about the one that when his confirmation hearing took place in October, I believe, in 1991, had the audacity to draw back into our history and use the word lynching and call what he was going through a high-tech lynching. Yes, I'm talking about that one. Had the audacity to knock down the Voting Rights Act, Section 2. And I just want to say one thing to you, because I'm a part of the hip-hop generation. And Jay-Z said it best: light nigga, dark nigga, false nigga, real nigga, rich nigga, poor nigga, house nigga, field nigga, Supreme Court nigga. Guess what? You still, to them, just. Don't you ever forget about from whence you came, because they will always see you as.
You know, I typically wouldn't play that kind of loathsome stuff at length, but I think it is important, again, for us to spend some time really seeping in what's being peddled by the left. People like the Reverend there. That kind of bilge is still going on in this country and still being preached on a Sunday morning. Now, I am just by observation here. Of course, I'm not a member of that church, but just by observation, I couldn't help but notice that there were a number of people in that congregation that didn't really seem to be reacting well or at all to this. While you did hear some cheering and what have you, there were a number of people, if you watch the video closely, that seemed to be kind of sitting on their hands and looking around, pretty uncomfortable with this. And I would too. This is supposedly a house of God. This is a pulpit. This is a place of worship. You're there to worship, ostensibly, you're there to worship Jesus Christ. And this guy's dropping the N-word and invoking Jay-Z instead of, I don't know, say Paul and the book of Romans. I don't know, Pastor. I would probably spend a little more time with Paul than I would Jay-Z from the pulpit, just as a rule of thumb. The naked, craven, disgusting nature of American politics and the left, wherever it's found, be it entertainment, as I said off the top, or even in the pulpit. These people claiming to be pastors. It didn't stop with him. The Right Reverend Warnock, Senator Warnock of Georgia at Ebenezer Baptist Church. The left has now decided, in clip 2 here, this is where they're going to attack this thing. They're going to try to tackle their politics from the pulpit. Here's some more.
The racial turnout gap since Shelby versus Holder 2013 has gotten wider. The Supreme Court said in their decision that we don't need these things because that racial turnout gap has all but disappeared. It is a lie. It is a bald-faced lie. Yes, I won my race. I run statewide. Yes, we got black folk in high political office. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg was right when she said it's like removing your umbrella in the middle of a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. They removed that umbrella, and that racial turnout gap has gotten wider, and it's gotten wider twice as fast in states that used to have to pre-clear their changes. Same folk who used to discriminate are still discriminating while they're saying things have changed.
All right. Yeah. So that's enough. That's good. That's enough. I can't even. Now that's ironically Ebenezer Baptist Church in Georgia. Interestingly, if you go look this up and check it out, since Georgia reaffirmed their voting provisions and requiring identification to vote, you will find, if you research this, and you don't have to take my word for it, please look it up yourself, minority participation in elections increased, not decreased. You know, on a previous show that I used to do, I took some calls from people around the country on this issue. Women in particular, they claim often that women are the ones that are going to be impacted if the Save America Act is passed, which is another element of this. So we're not just talking about congressional boundaries, but we're also talking about the Save America Act, its possible passage. The bill currently hung up in the Senate. I'm reading this from the Washington Post. Prospects are uncertain despite pressure from Trump to pass it. Analysis of the legislation has largely focused on aggregate national statistics. How many millions of Americans lack the documents that would be required to register to vote, and whether more Democrats or Republicans would be affected? And of course, you know the answer. Much like this redistricting business, it would benefit Republicans. Because if Democrats are even remotely inconvenienced from voting, they just won't. Democrats know that, which is why all you have to do is wake up with a pulse, and in many cases, not even then, Democrats will accept your vote. Democrats want to make it literally you roll over and click them, you know. Look, if Democrats had their way, Eric Swalwell most recently, God rest his perverse soul as he's jumped out of politics, he said he would love to see people vote on their phones. And I have no doubt if Democrats get their way, that's exactly where they'd like to take us. So whether it's, redrawing congressional maps and stopping this idea that we have to be represented by skin color, or prove who you are, use an ID to vote, and register to vote, those are not outrageous things. And the American public, it's key to remember, by an overwhelming 80-20 majority, they support the idea of documents to prove who you are to vote in American elections. It's not even close. And I'm sorry if that benefits Republicans, but even most Democrats agree it's necessary. But I remember taking calls from people on my show asking women, because they always claim it's the women that are going to have the toughest time with it, women that have gotten married. Now, I've talked with a lot of women. I know a lot of women who are married, a lot of friends who have had to have their last names changed, and I've not heard never have I heard one woman call me, express to me in email or otherwise, that she had a hard time getting documentation to vote. In fact, I'm told it's never been easier. Many times in most counties, it's free. Many times in most counties and states, you can do it online. It is not hard, which also makes it frustrating for people that want to see it passed. Remember again, Eric Holder, who said, gosh, it always seems like when the Republicans are in control, they really use their power to the fullest. Well, when it comes to the SAVE Act, they don't seem to be. This is an 80-20 issue that most of the country, regardless of their politics, agrees with, and Thune and the Republicans in the Senate can't seem to get there right now. So explain that to me. All due respect to the former Attorney General, I don't think Republicans nearly weaponize and abuse their power the way Democrats will. And that's why, by the way, blowing up the filibuster, Republicans are saying they're not going to do it. And they always tell me when I've interviewed them in the past, well, Chris, if we do that, then we'll pave the way. And I've by the way, I've had this from friends of mine and other people in media say to me, Chris, if Republicans get rid of the filibuster, well, we will just pave the way for the Democrats. We need our hands clean of something like that extraordinary thing. And I say, we do? Why? So, like, lose with dignity? Is that? I guess I don't understand that. If you know they're going to do it, and nobody disputes it, Democrats, if they should take control, will absolutely nuke the filibuster. They're not going to sit around and wait and play patty cake and tiddlywinks the way Republicans do on stuff like this. They will move heaven and earth to, as Eric Holder said, consolidate their power. Republicans very uncomfortable with power. In fact, sometimes I would dare say they seem comfortable being out of power. Easier to just say no and cross your arms on the sidelines than actually lead. So Democrats know they're up against it with redistricting and this SAVE Act. Will Republicans capitalize and take advantage? At the moment, it's frustrating. It seems like maybe they won't. Democrats continue to panic. This from Axios: as infighting erupts, Democrats trying to intervene in contested primaries. They continue to do this. This is also where Democrats are much different than Republicans on balance. The DCCC sparking a rare and heated bout of public infighting between House Democrats yesterday by endorsing multiple candidates who are still locked in contested primaries. They're putting their thumb on the scale. I mean, this is really quite something. You do not see Republicans really generally weigh in on primaries. Some suggest they should, but most of the time they don't. But Democrats are perfectly content to announce 8 new endorsements as part of their Red to Blue program, which provides resources and fundraising support to Democrat candidates running to unseat Republican incumbents, meaning they pick, just like they picked Kamala Harris. And the Democrat Party was left with no discussion about it. They just got her. And by the way, according to polls, apparently she's still the front runner, unbelievably. But the Democrats continue to tell their voters who they're going to have as their candidate, not let them sort it out on their own. So I guess I'm just trying to underscore, again, not that this audience doesn't get it, Democrats are deadly serious, literally deadly serious about consolidating their power. They control their own party. They control who's nominated. And if given the levers of power, they will try to control in its entirety the universe of the United States government. You see, the key in all of this, while they call Trump a king, no kings and all of this, is that Trump has consistently deconstructed government. He's trying to do away with the Department of Education. He's trying to do away with stealing your taxpayer money and fund it. Fund these NGOs and all of this fraud and grift. Like Dr. Oz yesterday. Give me number 10 here. Now, again, Democrats want to consolidate power to exploit tax money and funnel it to left-wing causes or just fraudulent folks. Dr. Oz, the Trump administration, what are they doing? They're trying to protect taxpayer dollars. Listen to clip 10 here. Dr. Oz with some jaw-dropping statistics of what they're uncovering. The brazen theft of your tax money. Listen.
Let me put the numbers out there so everyone's clear. 1 in 3 hospices in America are in Los Angeles, not California, LA. 1 in 3. I mean, how many people are dying there? Obviously, it's fraudulent. And the red flags that were mentioned in that wonderful report are all evident. You have doctors selling their souls, basically their license number, to open multiple hospice relationships. They dishonestly claim people are dying when they're not. If they steal your money, they will steal your life. They don't care at all about you, as you saw from that wonderful couple that's thankfully now being adopted by a real hospice. And I'm a big fan of hospice. When done correctly, it works well. But when 1 in 3 hospices in the country are in Los Angeles, we believe that at least half of those are fraudulent. This is massive fraud. Now, we've already delisted 450 hospices. That is an unbelievably large number. And guess what? In that first tranche, no one's complained. No one's calling us and saying, no, we were innocent. They know they got caught. They're just going to go off and scam somebody else, which is what's happening, by the way. There's been a 7-fold increase of hospices in Nevada. People flee from California to Nevada. These scumbags just rinse and repeat.
That's exactly right. Well said from Dr. Oz. These scumbags rinse and repeat. 1 in 3 hospices in the country are in Los Angeles. The fraud is stunning, and Democrats don't apologize for it even a little bit. They're mad that their grift and their fraud and their scams are being uncovered, just like in Minneapolis, where they literally threw themselves in front of ICE officers daring to get killed. They would rather die than give up their grift, than give up the gravy train. Speaking of LA, while we're there, there is a big contest for the next mayor. Karen Bass running against Spencer Pratt, the LA mayoral candidate. Listen to him just pummel her in clip 11, talking about the aforementioned fires in the Palisades. Remember, the guy said, yeah, I did it. I did it for political purposes. I did it sort of as an homage to Luigi Mangione. 12 people died. And Karen Bass, the mayor presiding over all of this, Spencer Pratt, gives us a little memory, a walk down memory lane of her leadership during this time. Listen.
I'd love your reaction to Karen Bass, who says you're exploiting the grief of people in the Palisades.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Karen Bass forgot that she let my house burn down and my parents' house burn down. And I had actual neighbors burn alive across the street from my childhood home. The only grief is my grief, my community's grief, that I initially started this fight on behalf of. And she forgets I've received 2 community advocate awards from the Pacific Palisades community. So it's the most insane, psycho, diabolical thing I've heard in a minute, but it's not shocking. This is the same woman that will allow 7,000 houses to burn to the ground, 12 people to burn alive, and then actively cover it up, get caught covering it up, and then say that the LA Times is lying, even though they have the emails where she's altering the after action report, which, as far as I'm concerned, is obstruction of justice. So it's disgusting.
Allow. I think Spencer Pratt's use of the word allow is critically important there, because that's what I believe is happening. As I said during today's show, this stuff is tolerated. It's allowed. I think the president of the United States attempted assassination in Butler, in my opinion, was allowed. I think when the evidence on the ground would create massive wildfires someday, if not dealt with, the brush that needed to be trimmed, that even President Trump as a candidate was warning about years and years ago. You don't do anything about that? I think that's allowed. The brazen theft of your tax dollars has been allowed right under all of our noses. And Democrats are not saying a word about that. They're just talking about more power, more power, more power. Why do they hate Donald Trump? Why do they want him dead? Why do they want to stop Republicans? Why do they want to stop the Trump administration? Because they're rooting this stuff out. They're uncovering it. And the more it's uncovered, the more writhing and the more hissing and the louder and more aggressive they become. I think it's important to remember that. And again, look, I get it. Things are not economically where we'd like to see them. Gas prices have jumped aggressively here. And Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, says help is on the way on that point. Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz has impacted shipping through the Persian Gulf, writes Just the News, resulting in higher oil and gas prices. The average price of a gallon of gas as of yesterday was about $4.46 a gallon. But Scott Bessent reassuring American consumers yesterday that help is on the way, that the conflict has caused gas prices to climb, but Iran's control over the strait has impacted shipping for now. But he says help is on the way as of today. The way to think about it is the market, because of the conflict around the strait, is in deficit about 10 million barrels a day, between 8 million and 10 million a day right now. So every crude carrier that goes through has about 2 million barrels. So 4 or 5 crude carriers a day coming through of the pent-up demand. We think there are going to be more than 150 to 200 crude carriers that can come out. So the market's going to be well supplied. So Bessent says just hang on. There will be a glut of oil coming into the market very soon, and you will see prices fall. I don't think there's anybody that cares more about this than Donald Trump. There can't be. He ran on this. And I hear from people who reach out to me and say, this is not what I voted for when I voted for Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump has always pledged that he was going to deal with Iran if he had the chance, and he did. And I think history someday will smile on Donald Trump for having dealt with a menace, a 50-year menace that previous presidents would not. But it does mean real inconvenience and real impact on the American voter in terms of gas prices in the short term. I believe he knows that. I believe Treasury Secretary Bessent knows it. I don't think these people are trying to intentionally hurt you. This show has been about Democrats who I do believe want to intentionally hurt you. I don't think that's the case with the Trump administration. I think just the opposite, as a matter of fact. Yesterday, he hosted a small business event at the White House and highlighted, in spite of the gas prices, real successes small business people are having in this country. I love when he does this. He brings small business owners from around the country and highlights their goods and services and products right there in the White House. And he and the First Lady go around and meet them from different regions in the country. I think every state is represented at these things. Give me number 13, or at least Republican states. I don't know if the Democrats participated or not. Probably not. They don't celebrate small business because those are the job creators. They would rather government be. And that's another thing, by the way. The growth of government. Do you know that we're at a 50-year low for government employment? Has anybody said that to you? It's true. President Trump has reduced employment levels by your tax dollars, lowest levels in 50 years. That's huge. Anyway, back to the White House here. In clip 13, President Trump revealing massive economic accomplishments here. Take a listen.
They're very much active in it also. Under the last administration, 1 in 4 new jobs was a government job, but since my inauguration, 100%, think of that, 100% of all new jobs have been in the private sector, 100%. We cut a lot of government jobs. And 2 of the 3 new jobs have been in small businesses, but I just want to say, so think of that. One is very much active.
So that's another significant stat. So I just told you a minute ago that government hiring is at a 50-year low. Also important to note, 100% of the hiring since he's taken office has been in the private sector, not the government. And that's exactly where you want growth. That's exactly where you want hiring. Folks, this is not easy to correct. When you have had massive government growth and massive pumping of money into the system for decades and decades, massive trade imbalances for decades and decades, a growing menace in Iran controlling our oil for decades and decades, the menace growing in Venezuela. This is President Trump is tackling fundamental stuff, building block stuff that this country has been built on tenuously for decades, and he's trying to tackle it all in under 2 years. Think of that. I know people get exhausted because the media is so hyper obsessed with barking about Trump at all times. People get tired of it, even people that are supportive. I hear this often. People will say, oh, I just wish Trump would stop talking so much. The fact of the matter is the media can't stop talking about him. It's not that Trump's, quote, talking so much. The media can't stop hating on him and talking about him. It's only been not quite a year and a half. Think of that. And he's tackling these massive structural issues effectively all by himself, not with a lot of congressional help, by the way, who should be driving this. 2 more quick things just before we get out of here today. Nissan, another car manufacturer, has totally abandoned another forced government mandate That is EV production. And they are shifting their focus to what? Truck manufacturing. Nissan has officially canceled its plans to manufacture electric vehicles in its Mississippi plant, opting instead to produce a line of body-on-frame trucks and SUVs. That's right, big gas-guzzling trucks and SUVs. The American public still likes their internal combustion engine, and they still like it running on good old-fashioned petroleum. And that is something that has stymied the left. They hate it. And by the way, some conservatives, well, not conservatives, but certainly some who call themselves Republicans who have tried to drive this plug-in car, in my view, fiction. I understand people love their plug-in cars, whatever, but remember, they're still plug-in cars. And when you plug in your car, you're going to have to power that from somewhere. And you're going to have to get the precious rare earth minerals from somewhere, and they don't come from here. They come from China. So you're making these toxic batteries of rare earth minerals in a car that you got to plug in and draw from the energy grid. And where's that energy going to be supplied? Not unicorns. The energy grid is still supplied and propped up largely by coal. Well, if we don't do something, if we don't create more nuclear power or something, and then you add AI on top of it, I mean, people want to drive electric cars. People envision a day where we're all plugging in our cars. Where in the world, between AI and fleets of plug-in cars, are we going to get the power for that kind of thing? It ain't coming from the wind and sun, folks, I'll tell you that. But the bottom line is American car buyers and manufacturers don't want, they can't sell, and American buyers aren't buying plug-in vehicles. They still want trucks and SUVs. And then finally, in Chicago, an alderman is calling for Walgreens to face charges after the company announced it would be closing one of their locations due to a high number of thefts and violent incidents. So Walgreens, you can't make it up. The American left wants to sue companies for closing in neighborhoods where they're not protected, where they're not safe, and brazen and rampant theft is allowed to continue. Lawlessness in cities attacking American corporations, and Democrats want to sue the company for closing their doors. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what the fall is all about, in my view. That is what 2026 and the fall of 2026 in November is looking like. And so despite what may be problems for President Trump or Republicans in polling, I see no evidence that Democrats are doing any better. That's my 2 cents, and that's going to do it for today from America's Heartland. If you like this news and commentary, I hope you'll subscribe to our Heartlander News YouTube channel. Give us a like. Let us hear from you in the comments if you would. And we'll see you next time right here on Heartlander News.